But before we do that, we usually do a mandala offering, a wish. We create a mental imprint of a perfected universe and then offer that up to the thing that teaches us.
Sashi Puki Jushin Metok Drum Rira Lingshin Inde Gampati Sange Shindu Mite Luargi Drogu Nanda Shinla Chuparsho Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniyatayami Sange Chudam Soki Shagnam La Janchu Bardu Dakni Yapsuchi Daki Chenyan Vipe Sanamki Drola Lechir Sange Truparsho Sange Chudam Soki Shognam La Janchu Vardu Dakni Gyapsuchi Daki Chenyan Vipe Sanamki Drola Benchir Sange Truparsho Sange Chudam Soki Shognam La Janchu Bardu Dakni Yapsuchi Daki Chenyan Gipe Sanamki Drola Benchir Sange Truparsho.
Tonight's topic, what the Buddha really meant, what they really meant, which is a hard topic if you haven't done all the previous topics.
I'll learn it all.
But before we get there, you guys get to review the last course together. And since we don't have too many people, I think we can do two groups. Sarah and Supriya. So go hang out with Sarah and Supriya, divide the room by two, and they'll catch you up. Hallelujah.
Oh, brilliant.
¿Cómo estás?
Bien, bien.
Muy bien. Thank you. Go out, let's divide the room in half, and they'll catch you up for the next half hour. Get yourselves into a circle, and then Stephen can flutter around. Here, Supriya, this is you. They know what to do. Introduce yourselves. Get to know why on a snowy evening you're here and not in bed. I know, that's not your babies. OMG, Ola. You can join Sarah. She's in a group.
I'm Chloe. Cool.
Hi, Chloe.
Who's your husband? Yeah, there's two, so that's the money.
Why don't one person should lead and then right.
Hi, I'm me.
Maybe there's before. Okay, cool, yeah.
We were, so what we generally do, have you guys been to the morning?
Okay.
You know, your first class, your first time to reach.
Well, to give a little
No,
context for those who
that's
haven't been here the last 2 weeks,
Oh,
we were sort of
Yeah.
doing units
Oh,
that span
so
2 weeks. And so this is on the last, that bunch of content,
But I know,
which is called Buddhism, which is,
It's really good to see you again.
it's pretty much sort of translates to like training,
okay, cool.
like John means to practice.
Well, yeah.
So it's really beautiful because it's like all these little practices of what you should and how you can actually
And they'll
train
get to do
your mind and function. Like that's over.
Anyway, so what we normally do is sort of like have these questions
And it's
do
cool
from
because
the last.
I don't know exactly how to do that yet. If we get you'll hear
And, again, like,
a lot of
questions
do this.
try this, so and then there's answer them like the right way, and then try
Why you should actually be doing your
part.
So,
Okay,
that's
so the first question, the
The
Tibetan word lojong,
And you stop.
which is like a the Tibetan word lojong has been translated into English.
So the first question is,
as
name the
original
author of the explanation
the
that we
reference
read
site
it
is
for our study of
Lama
freedom of the four attachments.
to the famous
And give
lojong
names.
a person
Who was
gives
nephew
insight
and who was
into
the way of
translating this word.
This is a different quiz.
There should be quiz 7 and quiz 8.
Lojong, how
What's your
it's
question? What's the
translated?
Yeah, what are you reading?
How?
What's ACI? Remember the class? Developing.
Yep.
Did I get it wrong?
This is the first question.
Developing the good
What's the
work.
first question?
And, then,
Okay, well, what's the
so that's
question?
different than what's usually.
The Tibetan word lojong isn't translated into English as
And then
multiple.
here it's like reference the English
Data referenced by eminent laws, the famous lojong is a person which gives insight into another way of translating this word.
Again, I'm not.
Okay, cool, so kind of, I just explained. 21 rounds.
Oh.
So you say mental,
No, say it
no,
right.
that's
Five.
it, say what the alternate translation.
Sorry, I'm just looking
of my
for-
training.
This first one was the on here.
License to the heart.
Developing, advice for developing good art.
I don't know the.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Forgot to put the first question in your cheat sheet, so I'll put it.
Oh, you put it up here, I was like, oh,
In developing a good art.
oh,
Developing.
yeah.
Good.
Oh, I'm gonna appreciate it. Okay, got it.
No, he's a reincarnation.
The second audit. The next one?
Okay, so with that,
So it's
Yeah.
Chang.
Chuck Rinpoche.
In what sense are other?
Remember, he was the one that was the advisor to the Emperor of China, and because of the tension between China and Tibet, when Pabonga Rinpoche was born, they gave him a different name so he wouldn't be recognized as reincarnation. It's a story.
Yeah, what sense
Okay.
are other living beings more precious than a gem that can give you?
Oh, you met Marco Polo.
This question comes from one of the first.
Yeah, when we get to the Sakya lineage,
There
he is,
are other people to be more precious than,
Albanian.
like,
Yeah.
like a wish getting jacked, like a lot of stuff. So it's
Rinpoche
saying,
just means precious jewel. So it's a title given to high eminent teachers. Yeah, it's not a name.
I think it's
Yeah. They should change that to.
No, but in advances in,
Okay.
so
Good heart.
lojong is like the heart.
No.
Is,
I'm trying to think, yeah,
this
yeah.
set of teachings
They're
where,
the two
teacher
with
to
which we.
student, where you,
But that is what we're doing.
the practices that you've already done.
There are tickets.
And
So like-
they're really
What you're saying, yeah, you're right.
It's really special.
Some people give you didn't really practice.
Okay,
So
is everyone okay on that?
And the other one was.
Does she like the kept repeating for that? What would you wish for if you had a letter that is
That
only,
you wouldn't even know.
like, just think about it, what would
There
you
was
wish
a
for?
source.
Exclusive, or we just meant you have to, like,
They're
it's,
more
there has to be a.
precious because you don't even know what to wish for.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're saying?
For it to be a
Yeah,
question.
like imagine you actually
It's
had a lab,
everywhere.
like, or something that's just anything, what would you?
But you wouldn't know what that would be like. Would a dog know what to wish for if it could have any wish? It doesn't know a whole bunch of stuff to
In what
wish for.
sense are other
It's the same,
beings
it's that kind of
precious than a
premise.
gem?
You don't know.
They give you anything you wish
You don't know the
for.
totality.
You guys remember this about a wish fulfilling gem?
And therefore, other humans.
And therefore,
Yeah,
more than
sure.
a wish fulfilling.
I just remember
There
that.
There are people.
Okay.
So what,
They,
what's the
they
question
can
again?
show.
Yeah.
Right, they're
In
just
what
source.
sense are other
Yeah.
living beings
Yeah.
more precious than a wish fulfilling gem? They can give you everything.
You basically don't do
So why are other people more precious than like the equivalent of genie's lamp? You know, that's like grants you 3 wishes, and the first wish wish you ever got comes true. But why are beings more precious than like this?
Technically, they don't
everything.
understand.
This is our philosophy class.
And people, they test you and they actually make you better.
Good, yeah, so definitely
So that
one of the
makes sense.
responses is that
So people have
even
even
if you had like
What's the official name?
3 wishes, and everything, you could wish anything.
You're generally incapable of even imagining the ultimate goal. So the best of them that gave us anything we wish for, we would not even be able to
Would
break the wish.
actually serve us in
So is that
Very
also the
long
sense of saying like,
path
for example, we all talk about like, oh, you know,
completely free
I wish,
from suffering.
we want enlightenment.
You know, like if someone gave me 3 wishes,
The fact
I'd be
that
like,
we don't even
yeah, I would
know
definitely appreciate endless
in
money.
the sense that
I'll take
it's
this
there's
really
a
much
journey,
that
it's
is
just a
from my
concept,
stuff
but there's
in
an actual
from,
journey to get there.
Instagram.
And the
And I would
journey
wish
to
for a
go
recharge.
towards it, that's why they're more precious.
So,
Because we know,
and
like,
then
we
the other
know,
thing you said is
by
that,
being class, we know
other
to wish for
beings
enlightenment, but
are,
we have no idea what that is.
why did you say that they're?
If you can't tell it,
They show you where you
steps
step.
up.
Yeah, they
They'll
test you.
present a problem. and
Those people are.
Decide.
How you,
How
like,
you
you can't wish for no one to
Either do
experience
it or
suffering
you want to
or
work
not.
through it, and the problems actually make you better.
But what did you say?
Yeah, there's a way
At this
to
point,
solve
we
it.
studied enough.
Anybody else remember?
Had a wish to be, like maybe before this class. But now that you've been studied at least enough, you feel like you have a wish to be everything.
But it would just be words.
Right.
What is enlightenment?
Um,
I mean,
but
you have
another
any
being,
concept
just
of
as
what
yourself,
that
is like infinite.
Right.
There's
And
always
what's
an
human?
opportunity.
We have an idea what bliss is, but we have no clue of what actually it is or it feels like.
What if you wish for something else? What if you wish for
Like
like
traveling.
traveling? Even for traveling,
But
you
create the karma.
But the only way you can really create
airplane or
anything is
to get clothes.
So like compared to like
Asking
asking
to
to
buy
buy material, yeah, it's only can't do that.
Mhm.
It doesn't have any value in and of itself. Like,
Yeah.
whereas like in this relationship, it's infinite.
Well, and somebody built this building, somebody built a road, somebody made food.
Yeah, and why is there infinite potential in the other person?
But what about the Buddha is that under truth by itself?
Well, somebody told me
Because
about
they're
They built the
human
tree.
beings as well. They're-
Yeah.
There's no difference
I
between
mean,
the
why is there no difference between you and the other person?
because neither thing has suffering.
Yes.
Number 3, if we continue to take the loss in any situation
So I
upon
would echo what
ourselves
she's saying,
and continue
like,
to give the advantage
recap what
in
I
any
just
situation to others,
is
what's
that
to
in
stop
other
others from
people,
taking
you
advantage
have
of
more
us?
potential than you
So the
have.
advice that we give it that prompted this question is
So why is
always,
that?
in any
And
situation,
so
take the
say,
loss
well,
on
you're
yourself
not
and
planning
give
karma
the
for them.
reward
And
or
so
the
you take
advantage.
karma.
That's the advice that
Something we
right
talk
here.
about a lot,
This is what you should do to
cause
train good.
you would be creating the causes.
What the teacher has taught to a student.
The
The
question
question
you do
becomes,
towards others.
okay, well, if I were to do that,
It comes back.
what stops people from taking advantage? How is that not putting
But
myself in a
then,
situation where I'm
then you
safe?
said there's no difference between you and the other
That's the
person. So why is there no difference? What does that like mean? You kind of have to apply this idea of emptiness, that the other person is
If,
this thing that we say a lot.
if I always
they are,
make the universe a projection,
yeah, they're a
The
projection,
universe
they don't have
will
those
be
qualities in and of themselves. And basically what it means is that whenever you have another person in
Also,
front of you, the way that you experience them is in a sense, it's unique to how we experience it. So like, take for example, my mother, for me is, she has a lot of love, but she has to drive some nuts, and she's, has all these experiences with my mom, right? But then, for example, if there's a mosquito in the room, that same like being
That's really the essence.
that I call
You
mom,
would not
the
have this.
mosquito
Yeah.
is
Perceiving other people.
Because if you do, it's still a seed you have to remove.
I said the positive aspect.
Yeah. She said the emptiness of it, you said the dependent origination.
So when we say someone is like, so a projection of your own mind, or they're empty, it means
You would
that
have perceived
however
that
you experience them is unique to you.
If-
And why
if
do
you
you
do not make
experience
other
them a
people
specific way is
Low class losers, they
what
won't have those seeds.
you have to study, but that is your
Loser.
karma, that is
That's
your
what you're saying.
projection.
If
Okay? So
Won't have
that's one of the
seeds that
foundations,
become
so if other people are a wish fulfilled or are.
So I can say-
Yeah, if you don't perceive yourself doing that to others,
So
eventually
eventually
you
what
won't
we're
perceive.
experiencing then.
So
you
in
have
every
to be
business
because
situation,
of
every
how
deal
you
you make,
treat others.
Mm-hmm.
And that forces you to treat them as your mom or
Efficiency. First of all, our career is to give as someone who rises.
They're not that way, in and of themselves.
We are pledged to serve others
Other
as their
people don't see my
servants
mom
and to
as their
ensure that
mom.
all their wishes are fulfilled, even at our own expense. Second, love
So like the other person.
any real suffering or want that we incur, we have given away what we have to others can only, in karmic terms, cause and effect, have been created by previous incidents that we failed to give others what we had. Does that make sense? Any hurt that we experience is giving away. And so like, it must be a result of like previous feelings or didn't give away.
And they're super annoying.
Otherwise, good
Because
good.
they're sometimes we force these experiences of them to give away, or them to be difficult for them to do.
Previous experience in this lifetime, we're
They are
Sure.
basically at a previous point in time, that's what it could be totally within.
You know, they show up with
Yeah,
a
yeah.
challenge. And when you
This,
overcome
however,
that
this does
challenge,
not, however,
you
mean
really put it in
that we shouldn't keep others from harming ourselves or anyone else. Because this will hurt them in ways.
So like, if they're really like, they're jealous of you, they're jealous of whatever.
Taking the loss of their like gain doesn't mean you like.
Going after
You have to
them
protect
because they
others
are wanting
from
to
that
have
same
them.
karma. So
Exactly.
if you
That
see
really is
them
that there's something unique
trying to
there
take advantage of you,
force
you have to tell them that
experience.
now
Someone
you're
is
taking
trying to
advantage
steal all
of
of
me.
your things.
Well, you don't have to tell them, you have to protect them from doing it.
So when you respond to
With the awareness that your perception of that came from you.
in your mind to like.
With the awareness that the only way you can see them that way is because you did that too. Without thinking them self-existently, planting that karma, which is hard to do.
Respond with love and kindness and whatever.
You got to stop the knife coming towards you so they don't plant the killing karma. Remembering that you planted a killing karma.
So I think that following your.
It's a lot to think about when the knife is really close.
The reason that this is better, the beings are there.
That's the trick.
To prove that the only reality you can have in the
Yasha
future.
Chekawab says that the brief
Yes.
essentials of the instruction are
The
combined
better
within
the
5 hours. Name these 5 hours and explain
You
them
as a
briefly.
being, you need to experience things.
Okay, cool.
Or
I understand. These are like the 5 things, so like, we just went over 2, but we went over like a whole list of them.
Than others, and then later
Low jobs.
you only
The
get
two- we just went over 2, right? The one around
experience
loss
like
for
this.
yourself, how you meet others, and then we went over how you
It
should.
also affects your
There's more
future lives,
questions.
whereas stuff that you
Right,
wish
so
for.
there's a bunch of others, but then at the end, we went over, what are like 5
You
hours.
can constantly be asking for those kinds of things, right, exactly.
That's it.
So-
Does that make sense? Are we okay?
Just to teach you
There's nothing
important.
So like,
What's that one?
because I studied Western philosophy.
Yeah.
So like, studying Eastern philosophy, so I'm like really curious about like the differences. So like Western philosophy, we know a lot like about talk about like others on the days of Western like nations and all that, but intrinsic quality of something. So
Setting your mind straight.
Yeah, it's called resolutions.
Experiences are subjective and
Right.
so like.
But projecting.
What is,
So the reality, like what does it mean, like the.
Yeah.
Also like what is reality?
So the correct projection of morning is to say, how can I be of service today?
And I would say in Eastern.
Let me hope that I'm helping other people today to gain a life and live a good life.
take care of them, who enjoy them.
Observer is.
Exactly.
So every single person.
Cool. The second one is the same word for meditation and reality.
Nothing like.
Yeah, second power, which means
A subject.
So what's
Meditate.
Depending which school of thought,
Yeah, depending on which.
and we'll talk about that tonight,
Habituate
actually,
yourself.
which school,
To that idea. So in every.
how each
So we
different
could think
school
about it
Buddhist
like, okay, when I
thought
change from
interpret
sitting down position
that
to
very
standing up
question,
position.
because there are
Yeah.
gradients.
Like, in every action I have to
Oh, okay,
highlight,
I'm
which I do.
Yeah, I'm very passionate about
I started reacting every time I
Yes.
exited something.
from them, I think.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
Then what do you like?
I just, what do you
Yeah,
recommend?
without mirror, I can listen. Yeah, if I only want something for myself.
What's
I cannot say.
habituation power?
Yeah, there, that's
Yeah.
like my energy.
You gave it to us
Mhm.
as
Another
power,
power.
like
Oh,
actual.
I see.
power.
I remember
Then-
But you're saying,
Yeah,
don't
very
put
good.
some of the
I see.
connotation, but then you're saying habituation is continuously throughout the day.
need the mirror.
Yeah,
Yeah,
So in
yeah.
English, that's completely.
Yeah, high five. Yeah, and also
English
and
is
also
how I
also
understand
remind
how
me
you do it.
the meaning.
The word gompa in meditation, the idea is you're habituating yourself, your mind,
And
to return to the object of meditation. It's the
Which
same
is-
way, yeah.
So what is the object of meditation?
It's also remind
This
my
says that
myself
this doesn't have to do with meditation, it just
is
means to habituate yourself.
yeah, well, there's nothing you
So
do.
she was saying-
But the thing is makes it so that
So
you
it's not
can.
meditation,
Yeah.
it's keeping your
But that's not
mind.
my point. It's like,
Slow
like,
down,
I
keeping your
see
mind
myself,
on
but also
the
remind
being
me
of service to other
from other people.
Throughout the day. Anything
You're definitely
But that's
an
not
architect's high.
what
I like
meditation is.
Sarah, you need to hurry up because there are two questions.
Okay.
Like habituation of
Number three.
compassionate mind.
If we continue to take a loss in any situation
What are you up to,
upon
Sabrina?
ourselves,
What question?
Yeah, but like, you just said, hey,
Last
it's-
question.
Five powers.
So we
Yeah.
can't mean it is, but-
Remember that?
we haven't started with it yet.
It's taking advantage.
So we'll go through that.
It's like in the
You're
Buddhism,
wrong.
one of the
Yeah.
What was the third?
advices is that if someone comes along and taking advantage of
The
you,
virtue power?
that you would see that and still give whatever.
Say that again?
And so it's saying, but if you do that, then people will just be taking advantage of you all the time.
Who's the highest you
Do
talking
you guys remember that?
Everything I've got.
No.
Well, we talked a little bit about
Yeah.
how like,
Let them say that we all draw how.
your concept that you're doing good things and not trying to do bad things for test.
Lifting up your coworkers, like, oh, yeah, like, that's.
You said that.
Or let it
That's
go
the
there,
thing.
yeah.
What did I say?
You said it in the cab.
How did you do the best good things?
Yeah, do the best good thing.
With the money, that was
There's nothing
what I-
given.
I practiced.
Yeah, with that.
And,
Imagine how helpful.
What did you
Super
do?
helpful.
So.
I was thinking, he was telling me he had problems with money. So he said, take it, a $10 bill
it might be that
and spin
another
it
person out of that position is the best.
for a long time and put it
Maybe,
near my Buddha, actually sitting under the Buddha.
Like, charge it up.
It's
Charge
not
it
being, you're not being.
and then find a way to
I don't know
use
what
it.
I'm saying.
And I was thinking my biggest problem in the
I
past.
think I remember like Hector was saying, if
Like the most
you're
harm
not
I've done
supposed
is
to
like
just
in
let
a
it be,
relationship.
if your intention
So
was
I
like, I
found
know that this
the
could be
girl
beneficial for the other
That was,
person, then I must have this job, I must have this promotion.
she ran away.
Yeah, so you could,
She
you
created a
don't
foundation.
give them everything
where she
unless that
protects
is the sum of
women
that are
from
good
having
for
that
others,
attitude.
that it is, that
So I gave it
not take, you take it, like to
And
not
it's
get
very
taken
hard.
advantage of.
You know, it's called.
The choice is always
It's a
about
flower
what could benefit
foundation.
the other person.
She's
I
a
like,
flower.
yeah.
The intention behind your decision,
She's a
whether someone's taking advantage of you, depends on whether or not the choice that you make
Huh?
has a better outcome to help the other person,
She rescues people.
That was part of it.
right?
Yeah,
She ran
I
away.
know me, how are
She
you?
had it
Hello.
done.
I think one of the important things though to remember with this
Across
one
the desert.
is that, number one,
You got
is
rescued.
if you have an
walked around and
experience of
became
someone
a fashion
taking
model.
advantage of you,
Yeah, it's a true story. It's become a movie.
You take advantage.
exactly, so first you have to remember that if your experience is that, it keeps coming from you, because. And then, number two, I think is what you guys were talking about. about. That, well, let me just read the question, the answer to make sure I'm on track. But,
You shoot them, I placed it near the pool.
You're writing three now.
So every day when I walk by, I go through that.
yeah,
Shoot them
it's
somebody.
created in a.
Like poisoning,
incident
like
in which
making-
we failed to give others.
Without
And then thinking.
Or we
about
wanted
what I
those
did.
who had.
Yeah, but that was how-
Oh,
And when I saw this woman.
What we just said, and then
That's the.
also, it doesn't mean that you are a doormat for every part, that is what you guys were moving.
I picked it when my mind was ready.
Taking,
Like my mind knew,
it's your job.
now I know how to do it. You know what I mean? While I was so
From doing that,
confused.
because they will
I did it
find very negative seeds for
These five
themselves.
numbers are very.
So it's not that you just.
Like, here's 10
let
bucks,
people
I'm
take
willing to
advantage
No.
of you, you're not a doormat.
The 4 powers is used in number 4. Yeah.
And then when I knew I knew,
You've done it.
Yeah.
I let my intuition come.
Am I going to like put up, am I gonna put my foot down? So
You
that
can keep
person
doing
doesn't
it.
create negative causes in their world?
Yeah.
Or.
I just want to say
they
that
have a
I'm trying to
very-
listen through Billy's ears,
My,
right? And you all sound really
this is
weird.
my-
I know, I was thinking
Just
that.
saying.
on me because I've done it in the past. And
Oh, how easy it is.
I'm guessing, I don't know if they do or
Do you have
not.
any
But,
in order.
yeah, I think they're weird.
For the greater good.
I mean, I'm weird, so it's okay.
So you don't see it as like you're just feeding.
I must say that from years
You
of
see it with,
different centers, I've
understanding
become
of
way
where.
weirder. When I first thought, when I first walked
And
in.
then at that point, it's not.
Great, good advertising.
It's being
Become more weird.
Come with me, looks like packing something in the farm.
Yeah, so we
This
just
is a-
one second quiz, quickly for the last 2 hours, right? You ready?
That's a real fact.
That's like, what's to stop you from keeping? So the last 2 hours is for us to understand. The fourth one is to talk about like, what Patrick did, and multiplying.
Yeah, just
those
start taking
doing,
advantage of others.
and then
so that
the
you
fourth
don't
one is
have
that
to
you show rip out the bad, like purifying.
Um,
Once you've already done something that you
How do you do that?
regret,
That was
okay, how to stop it from.
Write the famous verse of freedom from
How do you do that?
attachments. Do
You guys remember this one?
I don't have it memorized
What's that?
either. but-
I'll put it on the board for you guys so you can hurry up. Yeah.
Okay. You,
Okay.
you define what you did for your laptop, that didn't work. You shouldn't do
It's
that.
called the freedom.
That's the four attached. Then you think, then you bring up that feeling of it,
And
and
it's,
intelligent regret, where you don't like beat yourself up about it. Oh, I guess I didn't do that.
I just
didn't
gotta
need to
find
do
it.
that. I didn't want to add
It's,
that.
if you're
Then
attached to
you
this
decide
life,
to, for a
you
moment,
have,
learn how to done, or it could be a day or a week where you decide, I'm not gonna do that again.
you guys remember
Or a
this,
minute,
a
yeah.
person who is
And
still
then,
attached to
or
this life
you find
is
someone
the
else
Dharma
who
practitioner.
might have that same problem, and you help them not.
A person who's still attached to the three worlds,
That
or the three realms.
stops that.
That's not the three realms.
Which, put it in motion, it's already been done. but
Oh,
it
the
stops
lower
it from happening.
Yeah, the lower. Remember?
So you're gonna
human
make
and,
people
shadow.
stop doing the thing that you did.
Yeah.
To help,
Wait, is that the
help them
second?
out. Find someone else that has the same problem. If you are.
That's
I'm sorry, yeah.
You do not have enunciation?
I don't have here.
What is that again? Sorry.
Actually, I think that might be,
I'm sorry.
Samsara is.
No, the fourth one is
freedom
choices.
of life.
Oh, sorry,
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
talking
cycles.
Yeah,
suffering.
Okay.
I think you mixed that with.
Sarah, I think I gave you the wrong answer. I think he's talking about the desire realm, the form realm.
So the fourth one is rejoicing, so.
But that's still within samsara.
It talks
The fact
about.
that
Yeah,
you
yeah, okay.
stop
There
that
are more
thing
than 3 realms in
for X amount of
For-
time.
And then within the desire realm, there's like 6.
Yeah.
In.
There's as many as there are beings, but
Yeah.
you can split them into groups
It
of
was fine.
6 or 3.
Okay.
Establishment, you did find out.
There's one for you. It's a
Rejoice
mixed
in
realm. Totally.
It's like, there's the ripple.
Yeah, yeah.
The way you do that is by.
And then-
And then there's a Ming today realm.
And the fourth factor in the universe.
Yeah, it's called the freedom of the force.
Yeah.
It's the same as the
I
fourth
wasn't
course,
that wrong.
it's the same as the color medication, but just about.
From what I
People not
remember,
right.
this is like.
Yeah.
Antidote is.
Are we official four?
Opposite. It's the opposite.
The official forces.
Okay.
There's 2 ways of saying the 4 forces. But first one is refuge. The easiest way for me to remember is take refuge. Remember where the world comes from. Yeah, which is the thing you're about to purify didn't come from nowhere.
you're gonna either.
You're in a relationship to it because of emptiness, yeah,
So
which
if
means
you
it's
think
changing.
that you could move
So
something around.
refuge, regret, shit, I did do that.
In the world.
I have the seeds for
As
that.
opposed to.
I must get the
finding
results for that.
seeds for it.
I really don't want to
You don't
regret
have
for real. Yeah.
The view is the perception of the world.
Refuge,
You
regret,
is, karma and.
No.
Decide not to do
It's
it.
4 hours.
You refer
Yeah.
to.
restraint,
Yeah.
restraint. I was trying to think of the 4 hours. Restraint meaning the particular cause that was that seed
What
you're
did
trying
she
to
say?
remove.
Yeah, what did she say?
Stop doing that
It's,
for as long as you possibly can, if not forever.
Yeah, go ahead.
And last one is
Remedy.
remedy. Do the remedy, which is the antidote. Yeah. Some do the opposite. Plant the opposite seed. So if you're removing and killing karma, you want to take care of life. If you're removing a lying karma, you tell the truth. Decide to tell the truth at the next meeting.
Everything
No,
else.
but then what she was saying this thing about like finding another guy.
Find another person who has the same problem as you.
The 4
help them
steps.
That's the 4 steps.
But that's the 4 steps that are usually used in a puzzle.
Correct. The 4 steps are how to
That's
create
not
a
part of the
world.
teaching?
Then you have.
Huh?
Is that not part of the
No, it's not the purification.
One of the Buddhist.
Where is that?
Nirvana
Where's
is
the-
how to make things happen if you want.
How to make things happen?
Yeah.
Like she's
How do you
using
make it
it,
work?
she's using the English way, that's not what we.
Yeah, she's wrong. She should leave.
I know it could work though. The reverse.
Good debate, good debate. Yeah.
It's a good debate.
Just get on with it. I can't wait to start this class. We're gonna have 5 minutes for the class.
The answers of that. Right. We'll talk about
Do
some
something
interest
with
in
it.
that.
And that's still.
So
we're still in this unit on low job.
Say that again.
This is another one of those little, that's
That doesn't
not, they all come
apply
out
to
little
you.
short phrases. So one of them is,
You have no
we did last week was,
And Nirvana together.
Yeah, no,
Also,
it's
just
just
like
like
you're
you're
not
not
doing it for.
But that's only
But
part.
it's gone.
So I'll read
But
this.
Nirvana
and
is,
then,
that's the end of.
write the famous
Yeah.
verse of the freedom.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
A
Everyone
person
else
who
okay
is
with you?
still attached to this life is
Cool.
no Dharma
All right,
practitioner.
and then number 3.
A person who is still
In
attached to
discussing why
the
one
three
should not be
worlds
attached to
has
the
no
3 realms.
renunciation. A person who is
The
still
Holy
attached to
Lama
getting what they want is no
Yeltsin
bodhisattva.
mentions the pain
A
of
person who still
and
grasps
describes the suffering of the 3
things
lower
has no
realms, okay?
Okay.
So
A lot
name
of
these 3
words in there that
realms,
people might not.
describe where they are,
What's wrong with the word?
and explain how
No, I'm just saying
they
that's
these
a
realms. So we're
weird
talking
wish.
about the lower realms.
Yeah,
Animal realm, hungry
it's a
ghost
low
realm,
jump, which
and
means it's a
healthy.
condensed meaning that's supposed to freak you out
And then we're
after
saying,
decades of studying.
where do those realms come from?
The teacher sort of waking you up, going, don't get
Of
complacent,
being
think this way.
take, how does
This
being
is
find
totally
themselves
opposite
as a
to
dog,
how
or
I
find themselves
wish
as
every
a
day.
healthy, or find themselves in a.
I just want to have a good life.
How does
you
that
know.
happen?
I know, exactly, yeah. So
And
then,
this is just like.
this is saying,
And how?
if you're only focused on yourself, you're not going to get what you need.
Like doing
Like
that.
we think, like I've
Yeah,
imagined
they did
eternal
that, or they,
that
yes,
somebody
there was
somewhere is
something more negative
experiencing
from it
eternal
than
pain.
good.
And now you're
And
telling me
but
that I
what
gotta
makes
wish
it
for
is
that.
animal
No, no,
realm.
if you are attached to
It's
your
a place
own
out
self-interest,
there
you
that
have no body
just,
teacher.
like, pop into.
So I gotta, the mystic power,
Yeah,
right?
You go to.
Extraordinary karma of wishing
Based
all
on
the
your
pain of
karma
all 3
or
realms
your
rubbing upon me as you die.
It's not a
'Cause-
karma
yeah.
credit.
I gotta
for it.
wish for the most.
So I just wanna make sure.
No,
Yeah.
you're writing the extreme pain you're gonna get at death and using it for good. You're gonna get that pain. Just getting it and letting it burn. You're gonna say, even that pain, let me use it to remove anybody.
Or how do you get to the?
You're not wishing
Where
that
the-
you
where
have
the
it,
realm
you're
comes
wishing
from?
that
How
you
is the
take it
realm
away from
created?
others.
So any experience that you
If-
have that is anything,
Yeah.
you could
And-
If there's a wish, when you die, right when you
just
die.
say.
All the pain of the 3
It's
realms
like when you think
combined
about
on me.
before you die.
I don't know, I think it's
It's not the same when you're like, there's nothing right now.
Yeah, it's,
I might wake up and say, I wish you were a bug, you did really well.
That's what's freaking me out.
That's always.
that's the point that's the point of a low jump.
As you die.
So basically,
As I die,
what they're
I'm
like
dying
trying to do
secretly.
at
You will.
That's gonna happen anyway.
And already, there isn't like.
Oh,
my dad passed away in his
Or
sleep.
a hungry ghost, all this,
According
you
to-
know, you know,
yeah.
sappy sake, that's not.
There is a
Right?
particular pain
What
described in the
was created
sutras that,
from is
that occurs at the moment of death when you feel the panic of letting go. And that pain is nothing like you've experienced on earth today, apparently.
For example, we take.
I didn't cover it too well because I didn't want to scare everybody, but that's
When
We remove
my
all
mind
consciousness from the
engages with that,
a kind of,
object,
so it's a mental pain,
my
it's not a
mind
physical
is
pain.
forced
And
to
it's
experience
so intense that it's
shrink
nothing you can
as a
describe,
thing where I
you've
see
lived
shade,
through
as
yet.
a thing that
in
is
contact.
really big,
So
but
So how many were you gonna have that?
that I.
if you're
cut
going
down,
to
that
do
has
that,
wood that I burn, I have
may as well use
experience
it
of a tree
to say when that pain comes, whatever the pain is,
walks up to
may
that thing
I imagine it's
that I
removing
cultured
everybody's
dog
pain
called something
forever.
else.
I'm gonna suck all the things that everybody
And
did to that.
it's like you did with a $10 bill, it's charging up that mental experience.
To mark its territory.
So just the wish of
It's
it.
kind of like a
And
Jesus on the cross.
And even if I did, and
You died on
all,
pain.
it wouldn't mean the same thing.
It's basically, yeah, that, you could say that,
Where all the other
but it doesn't mean you should go get
in
crucified.
relation to where they are, who's supposed to be
But it's true, it's like,
Also,
if you are getting
Yeah,
crucified,
Tree is never gonna be a home that
Alright.
I can.
5 minutes.
Okay.
Oh,
So this one's actually similar, so that
Good to have you back.
like you thought you were taking care of them, and you thought you were, and they're taking, this is what I'm saying, like, this one's similar.
Are we all okay so far?
An attachment to this life is an attachment to one's practice of the actual life, to one's learning, contemplation, and meditation. Explain the real meaning of attachment to one's practice.
The thing that makes us human is the way.
So this is coming from that first phrase, right, like you say, and you're attached to life, you're no
We
longer.
have a shared experience that
Explain what that means.
empty object in our minds.
Steve, what's the
to
question you're
Be labeled true and function that way.
What is it?
I'm gonna put it.
The whole number of
Yeah.
classified of
Are
Jefferson
forced
described
attachment
attachment
experience
as
of
Oh.
when they see that same.
Cool. Hurry, 'cause we got
that
5
same
minutes.
Empty object, and what makes it.
I said 10 minutes.
Is
I said 10 minutes, 2 minutes ago.
their experience of life is similar.
I know.
Listen around it, this one's
They
they
are.
But.
Is that what you're on?
When you're
Yeah.
attached to the things that you, so the
They
things that
share
you
with
grew up
everyone.
learning, like why do you think certain things on that? You know, we learned them in elementary school, you think of that as instinctual basic knowledge.
As long as I have another practice at Steve, I'm fine, but other than that, I don't care about it.
We have 5 minutes left.
That's what attachment means in this.
And then how can I get out of the room?
It's very good question. You leave like rules of the society, it- government, it means that it's very hard to get out of the lower.
Oh, you're in the previous
And it's
one.
not saying that like, oh, you need to
You're
shut up,
repeating,
like, don't,
repeating,
yeah,
repeating.
do things that are,
But
like,
you
you're
do
in
eventually
reality is not, but it's that you understand that where they come from.
If you
Right,
get
that
around
framework
just beginning with.
They're not like the rules.
There's, we all have potentials inside of us, it's like.
So that's what it's saying.
It's not some positive and negative, and you have so many negative ones at a certain point, so like burn.
Cool.
Something.
Okay, last question.
To the surface. That's just part.
In discussing the one should not be attached to the three realms,
Or it's not,
the Holy Lama mentions the pain of pain and describes the suffering of the three lower realms. Name these three realms, describe where they are, and explain how one takes those.
Good hard question.
Experience.
I don't know, I mean, I take it on.
Does anyone know what the three realms
I'll try and-
are?
Only if you try and finish all the questions on
So
time.
we're in it all right now. This is the.
You finished?
Well, the last question.
That's awesome, you're faster than them then.
Yeah.
The concept of
What are
time
the three realms there?
ultimately is not linear. But our shared experience of it is linear.
Animal.
Like what I do now
How, animal,
produces something then.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how we, similarly to what I heard you guys discuss, the perception of a human or a non-human world. It's the shared experience is forced upon us by something in our consciousness. It doesn't, just because it's there, it doesn't mean it's not real
What
for us.
causes you to go to
It is real for us. There can come a time where our consciousness
What causes you to
does
want
not
to
perceive
experience
time in a linear way.
that?
That would not be called human.
Is what.
But the human thing, because we're.
Right.
Your
Within human, you've got some movement
Attachment
of time,
Attachment.
some perceptual movement of time dependent on us. So when you're in a car accident,
the
it
more
slows
you
down.
become
When you
attached to ideas and
really
things
bored,
like
it
yourself,
speeds up.
and
No,
you
the other way, it
you
slows
wanna
down,
get
right?
rich in this life,
When you're enjoying
you
yourself,
end up
it slows down.
If you
A little bit,
cause
but it's
people
relative
pain
to
by trying to
the
get ahead,
individuals.
you end up.
So what we call time as such is like the measurement of time, like basically, so it's.
But even though it's a label upon a reality we share. But we really do experience the sun coming up tomorrow for most of us, and not, you know, the next day, not that night, and yes, next morning, and so on. That measure we call time, but that reality we experience in a shared way. Yeah, everyone here.
So you're
most
getting
of
at the
us.
causes.
Even if you're blind and you don't see the sun, you still have that measure of heat during certain periods. And that duration is relative. That's why we have meetings, that's why we connect. It is real for us. But ultimately, it doesn't exist in that way, in a real way. That a consciousness can be forced to perceive that rhythm as something other than time, than linear. Linear. Yeah. And an example of Buddha, and I don't want to think Buddha as a dude statue, you know, a being consciousness that can see through the illusion of what we think is real.
Like, it
Is that time for them is not linear. They can perceive in the now, or past, present, and future.
Not misperception, it's their valid perception.
As now, all the time.
Perception is that it's an animal.
For us, we'll be moving through,
It's
yeah.
succession of it's not, I think that's just like the.
So it's that it's now happening all the time, so it's not.
In conjunction with my history and my future. With something we probably can't fully conceive, except I used the example last night in the talk when someone brought up this concept of time as well, or the concept of duality. And I used Joseph Campbell's example that
The
time
question is.
that we experience it, the earth turning day and night. Because of that turning, that duality, we experience time in the 24-hour cycle that we hold 24-hour cycle, etc. Because the axis of the axes, there's no movement. There's zero movement in the center of the center. And that's infinity, that's timelessness, which is producing time. Yeah? So the more you're away from the center, from the ultimate way things are, the more time appears
It's a little bit in that,
in that black and white open field of opposites. And everything is like that field of
Because you're
opposites
saying that
in a place outside
it's
the center.
it's not that I'm causing other people,
When our minds are
it's that I'm hungry. It's that I'm looking at
You guys
things
done?
as if they can
Yeah.
satisfy my
Can you
hunger
hurry them up?
that I do.
Oh, we're done, we're just waiting for you guys.
By
We are.
constantly practicing,
Yeah.
that thing will quench my
Are you
thirst. I
Yeah,
need more
we're
of
just like-
that.
And
No,
you're
that-
stating
it's
that,
just
that's
a
your
little
reality, that's your reality.
That
Yeah.
increases my hungry.
Okay, ladies.
And I would be
Oh
rebirthed.
my gosh, you're not hurt.
Let's
I can
debate.
ask myself if-
I missed the question.
I know you
I
did.
dip in and out of that every
It's
day.
fine, don't worry.
Does this go to you?
I'm sorry. No, great.
So
Thank you, Ash. I forgot to
That was
find
wonderful.
out. We'll get it later. Sorry.
So they didn't do their question.
Yes, we did.
They didn't.
We have one
They said they
question.
finished, but they didn't do the fun panels. Sarah failed.
We're gonna have our questions.
So,
Oh, thanks.
Am I giving it to?
you're giving it to Rachel.
Like what?
Yes.
The hand pocket. Like it's a contained thing.
Yeah.
So we just talked a bunch of blah blah from another culture that's been around and concepts that have been around separate to the way we conceive of the world. And so we've been forcing to think through stuff through a different lens. So I commend you for having these difficult conversations in a very condensed time. You just did, I don't know, 12 years of monastic study in 10 minutes, you know, so the fact that you're even considering these ideas is it's already a awesome thing. What you were reading were the summaries of of what a teacher would tell a student after being with them for decades, and the student's gone, but I've tried this, and I've tried this, and I've tried this, and I just want out of suffering. I want to pierce through the thing that is bothering me. This thing I've got to understand as my human existence that has flaws in it. I just want to pierce through it. Tell me the answer. Tell me what to do. I've learned all the stuff you told me. I'm practicing it, but I just need a shortcut. And so in these intense little lojoms, these advices to break open the heart so you could have a view that is all-encompassing, you're forced to consider things that you've been studying for a long time in a slightly different way. Yeah? And it's supposed to sort of give you a little fire to go, what the hell? What do you mean give up? Be a loser all the time, give somebody else the advantage all the time. Because your instant rebuttal is no. And he's like, well then, that's not going to be fast for you then. Because you're going to have to let it all go anyway at some point. You're really done. How done are you? So they're really pushing us to our limits. It's not for everyone, okay? But I think it's important to understand that these advices exist. And then they're dependent on student-teacher relationship. You know, this is a summary of lojoms that were kept secret for a long time because they're a little intense for just anyone. You guys got to read them so you know this exists. To add complexity to it, depending on which school of Buddhist thought you come at it, and we come at it from a Western school of Buddhist thought, like we think things are a certain way, we're pretty sure, because we have scientists with white coats, you know, and we also have our cultural influences, and so we're pretty sure what reality is all about. But we make rockets and computers and so on, so we're pretty sure we're onto the right stuff. That's why we're so happy. So that's a joke. So it's hard for us to look at this whole world without our view. Our view comes with the investigation. Tonight's class is looking at these advices and everything else we covered in the last 7 years and say, well, we've been teaching the philosophy of Buddhist thought from a particular school of thought, a particular view called the Majjhimika Prasangika, the middle way in the implication school, consequence school. And then, I know it sounds heavy, but all it means is that over time they grew a bunch of practitioners who took on Buddhist thought and said, I'm going to apply it this way. I'm going to try and look at it this way. And when Buddha says this, I interpret it to be this. And when Buddha says that, I'm going to interpret it to be that. And when I meditate on this, I'm doing it this way. And so it has implications on how you do any of the practices in Buddhist thought. And they grew a bunch of schools. We'll cover them today. So I want to challenge those of you who have been in this class for more than a few years to just think of the lojoms as being interpreted through different Buddhist thought. Yeah. So I'm just going to whet your appetite or revolt you, depending on how your mind is, on this very important subject. So this subject, what the Buddha really meant, you study it after, I don't know, so you're 7 in a monastery and you start memorizing texts. If you're in a monastic setting, you're memorizing texts since you're little, age of 7, you do that for years. Eventually you get to the meaning of what it is. You debate from age 13 onwards. Every night you debate, it means this, it means that. And you're doing it all from that particular school, the Majjhimika Prasangika, if you're in the Dalai Lama's school, for example. You do it from a particular understanding of where the world comes from, and you've heard in these conversations, karma and emptiness, things are my projection. You come at it from that perspective. So when you hear the word emptiness, it means a specific thing. When you hear the word projections, dependent origination, karma, it means a specific thing. But that's not always been the case. And so after you debate from that perspective, after you study and memorize from that perspective, maybe at age 20, 25, after years of studying, you get taught this topic called Drange, which is the art of interpretation. What's figurative and what's literal, based on all the stuff the Buddha said. Which explanations of karma, emptiness, meditation, and all the subjects should you take literally and apply just like he said it, and which are implying something else. And so it's a massive topic because you can imagine everything's up for debate. And it can be a bit heady because the subject matter is dense. So I'm going to try and just give you an advertisement for it and get to the core of what it is. The text that we're studying is called The Essence of Eloquence by Tsongkhapa, who's a master of he was the first teacher of all the Dalai Lamas. He consolidated Buddhist thought in Tibet in the 1500s. And basically this text gets two of the main Indian schools of Buddhism and pitches them against each other like a fight. It's like he takes one side for a while, he takes another side for a while, he takes one side for a while, and he begins to debate and prove and force us to consider which position we should take. And then eventually he tells us, right, from the highest school, in brackets. But it's not like, so listening to these ideas in the West, we think when I say there are several schools of Buddhist thought, we might think, oh, there's Judaism and there's Christianity and they should fight. That's not how they think about this. The schools here are built upon each other. They're all the same stuff. They all believe fundamentally the same thing with slight different interpretations that get you higher and higher and higher until your understanding is ultimate. Yeah, that's what the highest school would argue. Okay, and so we're going to get there. But in essence, just saying this text is like the point of understanding the Buddha's words and being able to know exactly what to do, whether he meant it figuratively or literally, comes down to understanding this concept of emptiness. And there are layers of understanding this concept of emptiness, all of which, like, you already have right now some idea of the word emptiness. Yeah, you in your mind already, when I say emptiness, you conceive of something. And I guarantee you it's not that. It might be close, it might be a model of it, but it's not emptiness. Yeah. So Tsongkhapa then grabs a bunch of evolved ideas on emptiness and puts them there for us to go, is that where I'm leaning towards, or is that what I'm leaning towards? Or when I get angry, do I lean towards that? And when I'm happy, I lean towards this. It's applied for us. And the reason this is important is because the Buddha seemingly contradicted himself. Seemingly, I'm saying, right? And we'll get to cover that tonight a little bit. I mean, in one example, he said, there's 10 misdeeds, right? The 10 commandments: thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not lie, right? Thou shalt not steal, no sexual misconduct, thou shalt not. And then there are the 5 immediate misdeeds. There's 5 deeds you do that would send you straight to the worst rebirth with pain for eons. And one of those things is killing your mother, killing your father, etc., right? So Buddha said, if you do that, that's it, your life is over. Like, next life, boom, you're done. No coming back here. It's going to be worse than an animal birth. And then in another sutra, he's like, kill your mother and father. If you want to have realizations, kill your mother and father. So if you read those 2 things, how do you know for sure what he meant? And do you have a system for figuring out what he really meant? Did he mean you really should kill them, and then he was making it up when he said you're going to have a bad rebirth? Right? So it's problematic.
So like everything is in relation, then there's no like intrinsic answer. So like just whatever way, so like how there's always kind of like this kind of I don't know, dialogue, like in the Greek
Well,
philosophy.
are you saying, this is perfect. So are you saying that there should be a time when you should kill your mother and father?
No, I mean, like the text says the Buddha is contradicting.
Apparently, yeah.
So, yeah, so, so I wasn't sure, if you were saying that there is a quote unquote right answer or like enlightenment, like, I don't know, like, or there isn't. Like, I guess the highest will be, the highest will be you have both. Like,
Good, no, good. The highest would see no contradiction in both statements. You'd have to say that, right? Like that, I think is that what you said just now? Or did I just hear that?
Right.
Yeah.
You like the highest would be like you.
The highest would see no contradiction, but it would know what action to take. Like, should you kill your mother and father or should you not? You would know for sure. I mean, the Buddha's telling you, go kill your mom and dad.
So you would see the whole picture without, so then.
Without doubting yourself. After the study of Dranghe, you'd have a method to figure out when he was saying, I don't really mean that. I mean something other. Yeah, or I really mean it. You really should. Fair? Like you're intuitively, should you kill your mom and dad?
No.
No, right? But it's intuitively good enough.
No.
Intuitively, you want the money. I've got so much money in my wallet. Intuitively, you want it. Should you take it?
No.
Right? So intuitively, I'm leaving it there and I went, look, would you take it? You see what I mean? Like if you're just going with the flow, you already were told in the Lojong texts that that's one of the attachments, one of the 4 attachments, making decisions based on old impulses, right? That's not a method, because that's what got us here, impulses.
But then you're making a decision not based on reason. Is it based on reason or?
Good call. Let's discover it. Yeah, good. Let's see what the text says. So what I want to say is this book, The Essence of Eloquence, is dense. It's intense. Mostly, it will focus on the core of Buddhist understanding of emptiness. Yeah, because it is the hub that turns everything else. There's a million different things you can do by reading Buddhist scripture. You can meditate, you can be virtuous, you can be kind, you can take vows, you can debate, you can do 1,000 things. Which ones are you going to do? Which ones are really important? And so Tsongkhapa is saying, understanding what the Buddha meant when he said emptiness, and by implication, what he meant when he said karma, because they are 2 sides of the one coin. That is the clincher for figuring out how to interpret all his stuff. So he's like, why emptiness? And he goes and quotes the Buddha. It's like, why should we talk about emptiness? The Note Sutra, is it up there?
Tsongkhapa, quoting Lord Buddha, said, "Beings must wander here in suffering life because they have no knowledge of the ways of emptiness, and that those with compassion, Buddhas and others, use 1 skillful means and millions of 2 different reasonings to bring them into it."
So he's saying here in this text, right, he quotes Lord Buddha and it's like, if people don't understand this central idea of emptiness, they're going to cause their own pain forever without an end. So emptiness is that important and it's worth understanding. So he'll go and debate different schools of thought about what emptiness means. So just in this room, or at least the first time I heard emptiness, I thought blankness, darkness. In just the English translation of the word, tongpa, ni, in Tibetan, implies in English an empty room, a dark room, like, and so that idea popped into my head. Why am I supposed to be meditating on a black room? And it took a long time to break that initial thought. He's saying, if you understand really what that means, and he's then going to lay out for us a whole bunch of different possible interpretations, and each one building on the other, if you understand that, that will crack the code for you to be able to interpret what he says when he meant well. But first, you got to interpret what he said about emptiness. Yeah.
I was thinking, is like whether it is either like a feeling or a concept or thinking. So like with thinking, there's like visualization or linguistic. So I was wondering, like emptiness is like a feeling instead of a thinking.
Good, we'll get there.
Sorry.
No, you're good, you're good. We're more than, we'll spend a whole class on the breakdown of emptiness next class. We'll touch on it today. So this thing that drang came up. So drang is both drang do and ngat do is figurative or literally. So we're looking at, so when I say figurative or literal, is that, when I say figurative or literal, what's figurative mean? What's figurative mean when I say something's figurative?
Not literal.
Not literal.
You have to bring your own understanding to it.
It's abstracted or abstracted?
Abstracted.
Right, so you're saying something, but it's sort of pointing somewhere else, right? Cool, that's one way of thinking. Metaphor, that it's a metaphor. So maybe when he said kill your mum and dad, he was being metaphorical or obstructing or
Symbolism?
being symbolic. Cool. I'm proposing that understanding what's figurative and literal will prevent an educated Buddhist from bending these ideas to re-habituate their own course of suffering. So according to Buddhist thought, the only reason we're suffering is because there's a misperception happening in our engagement with the world. Yeah? And we have that as a habit, all of us that are human have that as a big habit, and particular to you and you and you and me, we have our own little nuances of that misunderstanding of how the world functions, and therefore create the things that hurt us. That impulse, that drive, that inertia wants to continue, doesn't want to stop. I mean, inertia, it's got inertia. And if you understand, if you believe in previous lives, forget just this life, if this came from even before that, the inertia is immense. Yeah, and if you don't believe in that, if you believe in generational DNA transference from that, then the inertia is still immense, that we have a habit for creating our own problems. And so here comes a text, here comes a Buddha, here comes a being that says, hey, I just woke up. I saw the mistake we all make. Here is what to do. And we're conceiving that explanation with our inertia. And if we don't know when to interpret, when things are figurative or literal, what to do, we will tend to do the thing that we have the inertia for, which is the misconception that causes our suffering. Does that make sense? That's why I think this topic is really important. Educated Buddhists, after the first 3 years roughly of falling in love with new philosophy called Buddhism, will lull just after the girlfriend became familiar, or the boyfriend became familiar, or the new house became familiar, or the new job became familiar. Then it becomes rot. And the inertia will take over and want to make it normal. Yeah. So understanding this should keep us sharp and away from that old inertia. Does that make some sense? Okay, that's what I think. So just for pictures only, we'll cover this later. I need to tell you that after thought and the sutras got written down, and humans like us got together and went, hold on, he said you can stop suffering altogether. Did he mean this or did he mean that? And we agreed and they disagreed. So we're a school, yeah, and we'll debate with them, and we win and they lose, and so they'll come and join our cult of figuring life out, yeah, etc., etc. So over decades, over millennia, these schools developed of thought about, well, what does he mean when things are empty? What does it mean when things are dependent, origination, karma? What does it mean I'm responsible for the way my world is? In which way? So I can fix it. If it's true that I can stop all my suffering, you want to figure out what he meant so you can stop the suffering, if it's true. But you have a interpreting what he said up here. Because these schools of thought, well, no, he didn't mean that, he meant this. So for those of you who've studied here, you can divide them into 2 or 3 or 5. So there's the functionalist schools, and then there's the independent and implication school of the Madhyamika, A, B, and C. You have the Hinayana and Mahayana, yeah, which is lower vehicle, greater vehicle, those that have bodhisattva ideals. This is for those that have been studying for a while. You can slice them in all this, but there are very particular ways to view this very important topic, emptiness. So we're going to slice these 5 schools, really 4, but the last B and C are the same school, but part A, part B. And we're going to look at their understanding of what does he mean when he means emptiness. And so here it begins. I just need to give you all that as a background so you know what the text is saying.
We're in the middle way school right now.
What you've been studying in this room, what you've been studying in this room is what all the little monks and nuns study for 20-something years after memorizing and so on. In the Madhyamika Prasangika school, the higher school of Buddhism that says things are empty because they don't have a self-nature, meaning there's no walletness in this object. Yeah, the walletness comes from the perceiver. Prove it. Puppy dog walks in here, they chew on the object I called wallet. For the puppy dog, it isn't wallet, it is chew toy. Because that thing doesn't have a nature, it can be chew toy for dog, and it can be wallet for me, not contradictory for me. Yes, with me and the dog, but between all dogs, it's chewable toy. Between all humans, it's wallet. It, without humans, without dogs, is neither. It's infinite potential. It is empty of being wallet. It's empty of being chew toy. Right? That's the highest school of thought. It says that the way things are, the walletness does not come from this object. The walletness came from this thing called consciousness. My karma, my imprints, my inertia made it so. Not by choice, forced upon me. Dogs have to chew it. Yeah, or pee on it or do whatever they do. That's what's forcing them. The higher school of Buddhist thought says that's what the Buddha meant when he said karma, dependent origination. This walletness originated dependent on all my stuff I did in the past that forced me to see it this way. If I see it as a good wallet full of money, it's because I gave lots of money with good wallets to others in the past. If I see it as a chew toy, it's because I didn't care for stuff and I just disregarded their essence or their meaning, and I just wanted to put it in my mouth or something. Based on the stuff I did in the past, I will be forced to perceive objects in a similar way. Cause and effect, because things don't have a nature, then they appear as projections of my consciousness, not by choice. That's what reality is in the highest school of thought. And that's what everybody's been learning in this room for 7 years. And the head of that thought in the last 500 years was Tsongkhapa, the teacher of the first Dalai Lama. He's like the proponent of that thought, Nagarjuna. Yeah, okay. That's what the Buddha meant. Okay, so that's what we've been studying. If you're in a monastery, you'd be studying that too until you're 25, and then you get this text and it says, forget that, that was wrong. The way you've been used to thinking about the word emptiness and the word karma, they say, we're going to interpret it completely different through another school's lens, the mind-only school's lens. And we're going to learn that way. And it's to confuse you, and it's to make certain you understand really what karma means and really what emptiness means. Because they're going to present it as if it's truth. until the end where they're like, just joking, really was the way you've been learning it for 25 years. But they will force you, when studying Drang, to forget you're a person that understands karma and emptiness as projections and says, let's think of karma and emptiness in a completely different way, which is unfamiliar. It will sound weird to you who have studied it. It won't sound weird to others who have not studied it. It might sound reasonable. And in fact, it's just there for you to debate with yourself and say, what do I really believe what karma and emptiness means? And it's not for the point of learning karma and emptiness because they're cool words. It's because the entirety of your existence is based upon this understanding. When you meet a terrible thing in your life, you want to find where it came from. Ultimately, not relatively, not how it came to your life, but why. Example, people choke on water. Other people feel nourished by water. Why do some people choke? It's the same water. The how is the water, I choked, or the how of how I didn't choke is the water. But why did I choke and she didn't choke? And from Western view, we have a particular way of saying, oh, it's because he's got this kind of physical thing, and the Buddhists will go, no problem, you've got a bigger throat, you've got a smaller throat. Great, that's also the how. But why do you have a bigger throat and they have a smaller throat? Oh, that's a stupid question because they got a dad with a thick neck and skinny neck. Dad, that's why. And we're like, that's also the how, but why did you get the dad with a thick neck and so on? Do you see what I'm saying? If you really want to stop, if you believe it's possible to stop the stuff that hurts you, then you want to know really the why. And this ultimate explanation of karma and emptiness is the why. Why you meet certain things and they make bad happen in you, or why you meet certain things that make good happen in you. If you understand that, then the world that you're swimming in can be a vehicle to wake up, Buddha, get enlightened, rather than more suffering. So seeing what the world is, what the fabric behind the world is the understanding of karma and emptiness. So if you get that wrong, you could either continue this normal life that we have, which is sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're not happy, and we have no idea why. Sometimes aspirin cures the headache, sometimes it doesn't. We have no idea why. We don't return the broken aspirin, right? Why in a relationship I'm good and then I'm not? Imagine knowing the answer all the time. Imagine really being sure and knowing the answer all the time. And that's the promise of this understanding. But if you, that's what the Buddha said, understand karma and emptiness and you get this. But if you get the wrong interpretation of karma and emptiness, or the wrong interpretation of kill your mom and dad, don't kill your mom and dad, well, which one should I do? If you don't know how, then you won't know how to get out of samsara. So that's the point of this. So the reason this text became a text in the first place is because there's this thing called the three turnings of the wheel. Throughout his life, Buddha taught three main core ideas. Early on in his career, he went around saying, everything exists the way you see them. Stuff is stuff. It's closer to our Western thinking. And it's made out of particles. And he taught the four hour truths. He taught the Eightfold Path. He taught a whole bunch of stuff. But the impression is that everything that's happening to you is out there, it's happening to you. We sort of believe that. Then he went to Vulture's Peak and he taught the Heart Sutra, the Dharmakaya Sutra. He said the complete opposite. He's like, after years of teaching, I think you should know nothing has a nature. Nothing exists the way you think it does. Things are empty, completely empty. So first he taught stuff has a nature. The stuff you meet is made, it's real stuff. And then he says, no, that's empty, and that's empty. He sat there going, there's no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, and no mind, no forms or sounds or smells or tastes. And he's pointing to the eye, no ear. Right? So So you got to know, well, does he mean it? And if he means it, how does he mean it? Figurative or literal? So there came a time towards the end of his career of teaching, 50 years, where there's this sutra where it's called the Bodhisattva's question. I can't remember the name of the Bodhisattva. I came and asked him, hold on, you said that things have a nature and then things don't have a nature. What did you really mean? And Buddha sort of backtracks and goes, well, what I really meant is some things have a nature and some things don't have a nature. Right? In regards to emptiness and karma, it means, yeah, this is the way it is. And emptiness means you couldn't have glass without all the sand and the heating and the rest. That's what emptiness means. There'd be no glass without the causes that made it glass. That's all emptiness means. You go, oh, good things. We have that, we call it science. And then he went and said, emptiness means there's only glass projected, forced upon you by your past karma. It is empty of being glass. Prove it. Elephant won't see it as glass. Elephant would see it as something to step on. Yeah. It doesn't have nature glass. Glass comes from you. It is empty. Yeah, there's no nature to it. The nature comes from you. That's what we've been teaching him. And so the Bodhisattva is like, hold on a minute. You said this, and they said, which one should we believe? And Buddha said, well, what I really meant, and there grew a school of thought based on that answer. What he meant is some things are empty, some things exist, some things don't exist. And he went on to explain. But the fact that somebody asked the question already proves that there's three big ideas floating around, and we should know which one he meant and which one he didn't mean if we're going to wake up. If we're going to reach the state that he says he reached, that you can stop all suffering, you can wake up, then you've got to figure out what that means. Is there a glass or is there not a glass? And in the beginning he says, yeah, there's a real glass there, nothing you can do about it. All the shitty stuff that's coming to your life, it's going to continue. Glass is there, there's glass. And then later on he's like, there can't be glass, it's forced upon you by your perceiver. This isn't glass, it's glass for you, which means all the shitty things that happen to you, they happen to you in relation to you. You change the shitty things, you can stop suffering. And then the Bodhisattva was like, which one did you mean? And he's like, well, I meant half this and half that. And that's what this debate is. And what he meant is very specific and sort of coarse. So if you had this thing, if you had the Buddha over here right now, you said, hey Buddha, all the terrible things that have happened to me or will happen to me, do they really exist? And he says, yep, absolutely, they do. And then fast forward 20 years, you say, hold on, do they really exist? And he says, no, they don't exist at all. They have no nature. That was forced upon you by your past karma. They exist that way for you only, my son or daughter. Shit. And then you think about that and you come back and go, hold on a minute. Do they or not? Because I can't figure it out. And he's like, well, what I meant was the shitty things that happen to you, there's parts of them that exist and there's parts of them that don't exist. And we'll talk about those parts, yeah? So you can understand what the explanation was. But what I want to ask you is, which of these three answers should you take as true? You got to say two of them aren't right. Or not fully right. Because you can't say the Buddha's not right. Which one must you take? If you came to me and said, Hector, my mom hates me or something, should I kill her or not? You should take three, because?
Because we never know the nature of these things.
No, I like that you paused while you answered. Which one should we take?
All of them.
Oh!
They're referring to different parts.
No, they're referring to the same thing. Things don't have a nature. Things have a nature. Things don't have a nature. Some parts of things have a nature. Some parts of them don't.
You should take the one that gives you the most benefit at that point for your.
Yeah.
What makes the shitty things?
Yeah, and that's what he's saying. So he's saying the shitty things are shitty things by their own nature. The first answer, the first time of his teaching is that there are really shitty things. Avoid them. Because a shitty thing is a shitty thing. Yeah? You can't change it. It's a shitty thing. This is a glass. Whether you like it or not, it's a glass. Yeah, but my Eskimo friend can't call it a glass. Doesn't matter, he's stupid. It's a glass. First turning of the wheel. It's a shitty thing.
Because we have the karma sitting in this one, we take answer number 3.
Mm-hmm. I don't see how in 2 courses ago you did debate. You could totally debate that, right? Because I'm sitting in this room, I would take number 3. You do a debate, but we won't do that. So you say number 3. You said number 3.
But I think it's 2.
But I think it's 2.
Would have to be because you're saying it's all the perception of the perceiver.
That's what he said in number 2. That's not what he said in number 3. He's like, I didn't really mean it when I said that.
If that's glass to you, because your Eskimo friend calls it something else, it doesn't change the physicality of the object.
So if shitty thing is shitty thing to me.
Just because the elephant doesn't know that a glass to drink out of, but he can't put his trunk in it, it doesn't make it any less what it is or is not.
Oh, what is it then? Is it glass or something I can't put my trunk in?
So,
do you see why it's important to figure out what he meant? Because if, based on this, you got to interpret all the advices of how to meditate, what to meditate on, how to behave in your world, we could just be working on the wrong thing. And we are all the time working on the wrong thing, by the way, just saying. Yeah.
Well, it seems like the third answer is trying to take us out of the duality of thinking. Either all things have a nature or all things don't have a nature. I want there to be something definitive, or I want there to be like either a clear designation in between there, or like a brand new category made, but it's almost like 3 is pushing against any kind of logic to say things are either one way or they're another way. Like, I'm not going to give you that answer.
Cool. It's interesting that the Buddha changed his answer, right? Changed his view when asked the question. He didn't change his view before he was asked the question, which is something Tsongkhapa says is important. Yeah, and it was to do with your thing. When the student needs something, you find the answer for that student for their next step. And that's partly important for all of us, because wherever we're at, we need to use what we understand to move to a deeper level of understanding. But at some point, you're going to ask for a lojong. You're going to go, okay, fine, I've done 20 different meditations. Just tell me the answer, right? And so this text is trying to get us there, right? Like you feel it's number 3, but it's probably number 2. Like you're just putting $50 here or $60 here and $40 here, just in case. Right? You Catholic? That's how I would do it. So should we take his answer? His answer said, it was his last answer. Should we take it figuratively or literally? Because he really said, everything I taught before was crap. This is the truth. I mean, he didn't say crap.
Well, can there be an option number 4 where it's both at the same time at different levels?
No, good. Which is sort of what he's saying, right? He's saying depending on the student. But you're both being smart asses. I'm trying to corner you. I believe that if you're in a state of mind that abides in wisdom, you could see how all answers are true. Yeah, which is what we were talking about over there. But don't be smart asses. Yeah. How do you decide? And this is what the whole text is. Tsongkhapa says, when he taught the first and the second, he said to everyone, I really mean it. Things really exist, or things really don't exist. And then the third one is like, I really mean it. What I said before isn't true. Things really only don't exist in a particular way, but other things exist. Right? You're still lost there. Tsongkhapa says, you know, you can't take his word for it if you're already figuring out how to take his word for it. If he said at one point, this is literally what I mean, and then at another point, it's like, no, this is literally what I mean. And then at another point, it's like, no, this is literally what I mean. Tsongkhapa says, in the 1500s, it's like, you can't take Buddha's word for it, which is really ballsy.
You have to figure it out for yourself.
You have to, like, the implication of that statement is huge because it returns the onus on you. If you've been studying Buddhism, there's nirvana or enlightenment, and you're out of suffering, right? And then there's samsara, suffering realms, people, misconceptions, creating their own suffering. Somehow not understanding the nature of reality creates our problems. This is saying those beings, us, in that misconception, have more validity to figure out what the Buddha meant than trusting a Buddha, because he's said three different things. He says you already have in you the capacity, and it's using what? Logic and reasoning, which is what you went to. I didn't want to go, yeah, you got the answers, I needed to get through 4 slides.
But
So,
like logic and reasoning, it goes into the infinite regress thing.
It depends. No, you can come to some visceral understanding. Initially, you get some intellectual understanding, and eventually, you get some firmness on it. The infinite regression is a thing that happens in a particular view, but we don't need to go there just yet. You can be certain about something. Like, I'll give you an example. Are you certain that you're in this room right now? Yeah, you're in this room. Are you in your bed? Some of you are.
I mean, I feel like there's always an intuition, and you can always argue for it with logic.
We're talking about the reality you are experiencing. Are you in this room or in your bed? In this room. Are you 100% certain or 80%?
100%.
100%, you're in this room, right? If in 5 minutes you wake up and it was a dream and you're in your bed, at that time, where are you? 100% certain in your bed. Which reality are you in right now? The room. Which reality might you be in 5 minutes? The bed. But right now, with certainty, you're here, right? And that you can be certain of. There's no infinite regression to that. That you could philosophize about, maybe this is a matrix and whatever. You could philosophize that way, but this is real. Like, if I cut my arm off, blood will come out. Pretty sure. Yeah, with certainty, I can say that, unless it freezes over or something. So the first thing Tsongkhapa says is, you can't take Buddha's word for what he says, so you're going to have to figure it out. And then he's going to give you a method for figuring it out. First of all, he tells you there's 3 ways that the word drangye can be figurative or literal, or interpret about 3 different things. One is words. We already did that. When we say certain words, when we express ourselves in words, some things are metaphors, some things are literal, right? So in words, give me an example of something that's figurative and literal, that where we use words to mean something else. I don't know.
It's raining cats and dogs.
It's raining cats and dogs. Excellent. Does she mean it's raining cats and dogs outside? No, we know what she means. It means it's raining mucho. Yeah? Okay, cool. So that's easy. That's in words. That's one way of thinking how to use the word drangye, figurative or literal. And so understanding Buddha's words, when he meant kill your mom or dad, or raining cats and dogs, and when he meant it's just raining a lot, that's important. Another way is in the level of reality. The reality that we are forced to perceive versus the reality that is. This is the idea of the 2 truths in Buddhist thought. The ultimate way things are and the way that they are relative. The illusion and the way things really are. Yeah, that's one, the other way. And then there's the third way is the way of understanding. And this goes into your infinite regression. For those of you who studied valid perception, the sema, right? Where you have valid cognition of what reality is for you. And then you have an approximation of what reality might be for you, and you work on that basis. For example, when we do the pen thing, the emptiness of the pen, we're getting an approximation of what emptiness might be. We're not in emptiness. You're not having a direct perception of emptiness. You're having a mental approximation of what emptiness might be through that metaphor. So that, think of Drange in those three things. Yeah. So then back to this question, in the meaning of expressions, when he says emptiness, etc., we want to figure out which of the turnings of the wheel must be correct. One of them must be correct, and two must be either incomplete or incorrect. And so in terms of figuring out how to apply a method to interpret, does anyone have an idea how we would do that? For example, the Dalai Lama keeps using slightly different words when he teaches some core ideas, and he changes it according to the audience. He'll sometimes say something softer. Would you stand up and go, excuse me, that's wrong? Right? He's doing it to the audience. But if you had to go and nitpick everything that the Buddha said, what method would you use? Anyone remember from the course?
With the gold thing?
Yeah, it's the gold thing. Which is treated like gold. Yeah? And the metaphor is in ancient India, gold was super important because with a tiny metallic, shiny yellow object, someone could give it to you and you'd have to give them your farm. Yeah, it's like, yeah, take all my cows and my farm. Thank you for the gold, or for the yellow metal thing. But what if it wasn't real gold? You just lost everything you worked for. So understanding that how to test gold was a really important thing in India at the time. And that's why Indian women wear all their gold on them, because you don't want to leave it at home while you're in the field, right? So you're wearing it all over yourself. That's why it became traditional to do that. So Tsongkhapa says, treat it like gold. Don't just believe, and he quotes the Buddha, which is, I think, a little ironic to say. Don't trust what the Buddha says, but let's use one of the things he says to test what he says. But that's another thing. And so there's three. Do you remember what they are? The three tests?
Cut it, burn it.
Melt it, cut it, rub it, or something, right? So melt it here is a metaphor for test it against your own experience. Is the explanation they're giving consistent with your reality, with your direct experience? Cut it, I think, is use logic, using reasoning. For example, your direct experience of yourself, are you alive or dead? Alive. Your direct experience, if you're alive, right? Using logic, will you always be alive or will you at some point be dead? Using logic, reasoning. At some point you'll be dead, but you don't know that for sure, right? You definitely live as if that's not true, but I do too, right? But using logic, like we use the logic of the pen, you can be pretty certain that's going to happen. Everyone else has died or dying. When you hear the ambulances, what do you think is happening? Yeah. So use your mind and go, oh, at some point I'm going to. You're not having a directive. You're not dead, but you're as certain as you are alive that you will be dead, using logic and reasoning. It's that strong. It validates your reality. So the cut it is like, you melt the gold or you cut it, use your direct experience, or if you can't, use your logic, and then rub it. What do you remember what that was?
Like, contradicts what you're already experiencing.
Someone you trust says it's true.
Yeah. So for things that are really outside this first two realms, you'd go to some trusted source, right? So when my mom had some problem in her stomach, she thought she could have a direct experience. She's like, maybe I'll eat different food, and being contradicted. Then using logic, she's like, maybe I'm sicker than I thought. Maybe I'll change my diet completely. That also didn't work. And at some point she went to a doctor and was like, can you look in here? You know what the hell is in here more than I know what's in here. Trusted source. So you go to a person that you trust has given you correct information in the past. And so you apply those three tests, and you should apply those three tests to any of the potentially contradicting information. And Tsongkhapa says the most important information that's going to change your life is knowing where the hell things come from. And that means understanding emptiness and karma. What does emptiness mean when the Buddha said emptiness, and what's karma mean? Yeah. So, which one is right out of the things have a nature, things don't have a nature, and some parts of it do and some parts of it don't? If you had to decide based on those three tests, which one's right?
Number two.
You're all indoctrinated. That's not the point. The point is to push you against that, and your answer is right. It's the one that's right for the student. Yeah? Because remember, I think Stephen read the quote, the Buddha will teach, will use skillful means and teach in all sorts, the emptiness in all sorts of ways. He can teach like 100,000 different ways to perceive emptiness, but it'll be the one correct for the student.
But in the first one, he's not teaching emptiness at all. So why would he teach that?
No, he does. So the word emptiness came up. It actually in Hinayana, and we'll cover that next time we meet. It's good. He doesn't teach emptiness like we understand emptiness. You're true. You're correct. But he does teach no self, selflessness, no self nature. We would add no self nature. Yes, and that's emptiness. I mean, just to give you a summary, if you're nerdy, yeah, which I know. Yeah. No, the opposite. Damn it, I got that wrong. No, it's like in the functionalist school, you say that a thing that wouldn't exist, the gacha, the things that emptiness is empty of, is a thing that came about without causes and conditions. That's the, yeah, that no self. There's no thing that didn't come from causes and conditions. And that's what that means. It's dependent arising, and a gacha, or the thing emptiness is empty of, would be a thing that could exist without being produced by something else. A glass that could exist without sand. That's not true, that's emptiness. Yeah? Then in the other school is like a little bit more complicated and more sophisticated. It's like you can't have a glass without its parts, the top and bottom, and the other one is your projections. They're the three basic ones that we'll explore. But the bottom line here is the right teaching that the Buddha taught is the one that's right for the listener. And we're all at different levels of understanding why shitty things happen to us. And sometimes we're gonna have to go, I've got to avoid this shitty thing because it's really out there, and my mind can't go further. And so you use your techniques in the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and all the stuff he taught there to get away from that object that exists that way. But after meeting that object that pisses you off so many times, at some point you're going to go, it's not working. And something will be born in you, if you're lucky, to say, I need to go further, I need to know more. And so you'll naturally ask for more. And you might move on to the second level and then the third level understanding until there'll be no contradiction, and it doesn't matter what's happening, you see how it functions. But that takes time and training. And that's really what this is for. So this is all I'm going to do for the rest of this, which is just to annoy you, and then you can all have a really nice Thanksgiving next week, okay? The heavy lifting for the course has been done today. Next class, which is after Thanksgiving, we get to really enjoy the nuances of where things really come from and can I change them. But today I needed to do the groundwork. 2 more slides and you can go home to bed. So when the Buddha said things have a nature, no, things don't have a nature at all. And then I think some things have a nature, and I meant these particular things don't have a nature. These particular things don't have a nature, but other things do. Yeah? These are the particular things that he meant they didn't have a nature, they lacked a nature. And then from that came this thing called the mind-only school of thought, which is a really important school of thought because it holds some really amazing constructs of how the world is. Kuntak Shenwangs and Jungdrups, do you remember that? Sorry, Jungdrups. So he said, what I meant that things don't have a nature is they lack any definitive nature of being constructs. Things lack any definitive nature of growing on their own. Glasses that make themselves, yeah, without causes and conditions. That's what I mean by things don't have a nature. And they lack any nature of being ultimate by themselves. And that's sort of hard. That's totality. That's the mind-only school's word for stuff, for emptiness. So constructs, mental constructs, don't have any definitive nature. That's what I meant. In other words, your idea of the Eiffel Tower is not the Eiffel Tower. Your idea of the Eiffel Tower doesn't have any nature. It's not made of stuff. That's what I meant. Yeah, that's one thing I meant when I said things don't have a nature. So all your stupid ideas about the world, they don't have a nature. That's what I meant. Okay, Bodhisattva? Also, the stuff, the Eiffel Tower, doesn't just pop out of nowhere. So I meant that there couldn't be an Eiffel Tower that didn't have causes, that grew itself. That started by itself. That's all I meant. I didn't mean anything weird. That's all I meant. And lastly, he's like, things have emptiness. That's what I meant. There's no, they lack any nature of being ultimate, meaning being complete by themselves, being total. That's what I meant. They don't have any nature of being complete by themselves, which is a particular thing that got interpreted. We'll talk about next time. Is that okay? That's what they said. That's what he said. Here is a little example of what I meant by kuntaks and constructs and objects and totality. Okay, here we go. This is how this school evolved and said, and used these terms. So imagine mom and dad making a baby, and that baby is now an object. I just objectify the baby. I called it pile of flesh with a mind, okay? Little baby boy. Good, you remember Tashi? So mum and dad want to call it Tashi, and they project upon it. They look at it and go, oh, I have a mental picture of what that thing is, right? That isn't in the baby. The name, is the name up there yet?
Yes.
Yeah. The name Tashi isn't in the baby, right? It's a mental construct that came from me, yeah, and got projected onto that object. So you have a object, a shenwang, a thing like an Eiffel Tower that couldn't pop out of nowhere. Yeah, it's a thing that was produced and it requires egg and sperm and womb and months and so on. That pile of flesh requires stuff to make it. And that pile of stuff doesn't have Tashi, doesn't have my construct of Tashi in it. Yeah, my construct labeled upon it is Tashi, and that's my kuntak. That mental picture of Tashi, the one they hold in their minds, that doesn't have a nature. Yeah? And a object, a baby that grew by itself, that wouldn't ever exist. There's no nature to that. That's all I meant. The implication here is that there is a baby out there separate from your construct, right? And that really is a baby, right? And this is where this school is different from the one we've been learning over here. And so the totality, the emptiness, is just that the label doesn't necessarily apply to that, and that gets heavy. We'll talk about it next class. You don't have to talk about it tonight. I want to tell you one more thing, and then we're sort of done.
We spent a whole class on that one slide.
We spent a whole class on that one slide a long time ago. Yeah. Just for keep's sake, I wanted to share with you this slide, which is it this slide? We spent a whole, yeah. So I can't read it because of my glasses. Can someone read the Hinayana's, the Abhidharma school, the first school? What emptiness is for them? Because that'll answer your question.
Nothing happens by itself. Things don't come from nothing.
Cool. And from the Sutra school?
Chunyi. Real nature of things. Nothing happens.
Pretty similar. Things don't happen out of nowhere. Yeah? That's, we all believe that. In fact, that's our scientific view. That things are caused, mostly. The next one?
Mind only.
Mind only, yeah.
Nothing happens by itself. Lack of any separate seed for the object and the mind itself comes from the same karmic seed.
So what they ended up evolving this thought about is there's a baby up there, right, that I'm perceiving. There's a tashi up here, a construct that I've labeled upon that thing, called a tashi. The mind-only school believes that comes from the same karmic imprint, that both the experience I'm having and the experience I'm labeling are the same essence. Anything that wasn't like that wouldn't exist. That's.
What do you mean by the experience you're having and the experience
Meaning,
you're labeling?
I see a lump of flesh, yeah, and I call it boy. My mind called it boy. There couldn't ever be a boy and a mind labeling a boy that was separate. They must come from the same.
But that's slightly different.
It's slightly different from the projection, because they're saying it's just in your mind. They're also saying that there is a lump of flesh that is suggesting boy.
But isn't that a contradiction in and of itself?
That's
right
yeah,
there?
but you only think that because that you've learned the other way for too long.
But I don't see how they wouldn't see that as a contradiction.
Wait, what's the contradiction?
That at one point they said it came from the same karmic seed. So they're in a sense saying that my mind created the thing out there and the experience of the thing out there. But then they just also said that the thing was out there causes and conditions. And it's like, well, which one do you want? You gotta pick one or the other.
It's the same cause.
No?
They didn't say the mind created it.
They said that the karmic seed in the mind.
They say that it's the same karmic seed, but they don't say the mind created it. That sounds different.
And then that you just made a self-existent karma at that point. Some other thing created a karma.
But you're hearing it from the old perspective. Yeah, and so we have to appreciate where you really think. So let's take it to our own experience. Who's had an angry boss in their lives, an upsetting colleague at work? Yeah. Okay. Where did they come from? Yeah. And we all have theories. I don't want you to philosophize on it. Like, why do you think that was someone you met? Why did they come into your world and not the next person's world? Or do you think they've been exactly like that to everyone all the time?
The way that I perceive it as angry is one school, and me thinking that I caused the anger and perceived it as anger is another school.
I'm saying, forget you've ever studied Buddhism, reverse your mind to all the stuff we taught here before. Where did that person come from?
think he's just a jerk.
I would
You
say
think he's
that-
just a jerk.
He's just a jerk,
There's
right?
nothing to do with you.
Out there, jerks running around. Yeah.
Bad parents.
And then when you, bad parents, bad parents. And then when you start digging deeper, like before you came to Buddhist class still, right? You saw them being nice to their kids or their wives and they're giggling with him. But he's an asshole for you. How can that be? Right? We're already beginning.
You're jealous.
Right. or you're jealous, it's fine. So already the construct begins to break, that he's a jerk out there. All of a sudden you've got some evidence he can't be a jerk all the time.
Well, if you're
He's not.
Catholic,
but
there's something wrong with you.
if you what? If you're Catholic.
Well, from an experience, it turns it back onto the person who's experiencing it.
For me,
they
I was being
just
punished.
don't see that.
He's insecure.
Most people never get that far.
He's insecure, so he's a jerk at work. If he wasn't insecure, I wouldn't have had that experience. So it's his fault, and I should punch him.
Wife just don't see that part of him.
Because
He doesn't show that side of himself to them.
right, so he's not a jerk.
And because they're blinded by.
They're blinded by love, which in your mind you think eventually they'll find out, right?
Yes.
Yeah, eventually. Yeah. Eventually they're gonna find out, and
I will have been right.
And I would have been right.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry for that.
Yeah. I'm sorry. But because she doesn't know that she's gonna get divorced and the kid's gonna be mentally abused, scarred. Yeah. We do think that way.
Perfect.
Huh?
Because nobody's perfect.
I'm perfect.
Because a part of him is a jerk just like me, like it's a mirroring.
I think that's advanced thinking. I'm saying before you came to overthinking it,
You never even questioned.
you never question it. The bad things are out there. Yeah, we're all walking around really believing that the stuff out there bothering you because you're such a bloody angel, right? You've got nothing to do with it, right? Why did you have good things happen to you? Let's stay in that school of thought. Why do you have good things happen to you? Why do you have hot water when you turn on the tap?
It's a work hard economical class. It's a work hard.
I work really hard, yeah, and so I got the water. That's where hot water really comes from. Working really hard. Everyone that works really hard gets hot water.
Where the technology has the best to store the water.
Cool, yeah. So why do you have access to that technology?
God bless him.
God bless me. But not them. But do you see the problem in the way we unexamined, we attribute all the qualities to the objects out there. We're not even in this middle way school. We're not even in the mind-only school, which already assumes you've got something to do with it. Yeah? We're in the first school. We're in the Abhidharma school, where you got to find the right equipment to store the hot water and get the right job to all these self-existent things, and then to shitty bosses. We are operating in that school. Anything above that is way heavier. When we add our cultural biases, meaning whatever teachers taught us, whatever religions taught us in whichever country we're in, we're just taking that on face value because we don't know how to understand it. Yeah, because when we investigate, the shitty boss has got a nice family and they're all giggling and they got friends. The friends are stupid too.
They must be.
They must be really stupid, right? They're going to find out soon.
I once had a boss that used to be my subcontractor. So he would process my film, and he was the most awesome dude for 12, 15 years. My best friend. Then I had to work at the lab, and he became the evil boss.
Yeah. So what changed? Yeah, what changed?
Now that we've talked, I'm trying to figure out what changed.
Yeah.
I can't see it. From this perspective, I know that something is karmically there. I can sort of know that we've talked about it, but I'm unable to see how that moment
shifted. Why that moment shifted?
I told him, get off me. eventually.
Well, when he was
He was screaming at me.
when he had to answer to you, he's great.
Fantastic.
But then
Like
when
best-
you have to answer to him, all of a sudden he's just an ass.
Did you yell?
So again, it's still his fault though.
So the bottom line is, without thinking through it, and we're overthinking it, thank you, Buddha, right? We're overthinking it. There's a marked difference to understanding why we meet all these conditions and why we don't meet them. And so far, in an unexamined perspective, we're taking it all at face value. We're taking, remember, literal or figurative at the level of reality. We say, there really is a person out there. My experience of them is literally, he's an asshole. Yeah? And it's not me, it's them. But with a little bit more dinging, you're already draining your life. That's why you're thinking about it. You're sitting there going, I'm racking my brain. What could have been the thing? And if you're involving your perspective in it, you're already that much closer to understanding why you have that particular experience. And that's what the point of this whole series of study is about. It's like, go digging to find out at what point are you responsible for the experience you're having in this world. Because your first one is, although the Buddha taught it, only functions to get you a certain amount of freedom, not enough. How many times do you have to get away from the boss, or go buy more hot water heaters, or keep working more to maintain hot water? And under a little bit of analysis, those things just break. Because if working hard gave you hot water, everybody that worked at a sweatshop must have hot water. If having the right equipment gave you hot water, everybody that had a hot water heater must have hot water. But what about those that don't have electricity? What about those that don't have it connected? What about those that it breaks? It doesn't work all the time. There are breaks in our literal experience of the world, and there's got to be deeper understanding, and that comes from reasoning, logic. And when you keep going, you're going to come to the point where you're going to say, well, it's in me. How much of it is in me? Only 5%, 10%, 50%, 100%. At some point, you're going to come to an understanding that there is something you're doing to generate both the terrible and this is the part that you sort of missed, the awesome experiences of breathing, thinking. Like, it's all changing. Why do you have the capacity to think clearly? Why do you have the capacity to learn numbers? Why do you have the capacity to keep breathing involuntarily? And others don't. Others need machines to breathe. Do machines make you breathe? No. I'm breathing naturally. And this gets you to what is the real cause. How is it really functioning? And if you get that right, even intellectually, like you did about, well, am I dead? No, I'm not dead. Will I die? Yes, I will die. Intellectually, you got that. Imagine if you intellectually, because of this process of analyzing where things come from, like we did about your dad, that I understand how the world functions. I understand the mechanics of what is it that makes me see shitty beings, makes me see breath as natural, makes me see words as wisdom. And if you understand that mechanic, you're set. You can then get to work. It doesn't change things overnight. You just got a different code for the matrix that you were, a different map for the terrain you've been blindly running over. And this map shows you a 3D perspective of what you couldn't see before. That's at least the promise of the next class. Good night. Cool. I told you it was going to be hard.
Sashi Pujishin Metotra Viram Likshin Inde Kimpadi Sange Shindu Nikte Wargi Drokun namda shimla chuparsho. Idam guru ratnamanda kamniyatayami. Gewadi gyokun. Sunam yeshe sok sok shin. Sunam yeshe lejunwe. Tamba kuni toparsho.
Thank you for being part of a difficult subject and putting your minds onto questions that hopefully will open up doors so you can then walk around and answer them for yourselves.